Hi, my name is Kevin Benner, and I'm a Senior Professional Services Engineer with NetBrain. Credential management is an important part of the NetBrain platform, but if you're like most admins, you probably just load up your CLI usernames and passwords and your SNMP community strings, and after your initial device discovery is finished, you forget about them. Until there's a problem. And then suddenly, managing your credentials becomes a very big deal. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks in NetBrain's Network Settings screen, which is NetBrain's window into the management and reporting of all of your credentials. Let's take a look. First, let's look at a screen you might already deal with on an everyday basis, Shared Device Settings. There are lots of ways to reach Shared Device Settings. One is to right-click any device on a map and choose it from the menu. Here we can see which CLI and SNMP credentials the device is using. In this case, we can see this NY_router device is using username at NetBrain and SNMP community string NB. But what if I need to run this in reverse? In other words, what if I need to know the full set of devices using username equals NetBrain or SNMP community string equals NB? In fact, what if I have some old credentials loaded in NetBrain and I wonder if any devices are still using them at all? That's where the network settings display comes in. If I go to my tic-tac-toe dots in the upper left corner and open Network Settings, I can start in SSH Login. By the way, everything I'm going to talk about next applies equally to the Telnet SSH Login tab, as well as your SNMP credentials in the SNMP String tab, your privilege logins, your private keys, Jumpbox if you're using any, and front servers all in their corresponding tabs. Okay, so here I see a list of all of my loaded credentials. Notice that only the cosmetic alias field needs to be unique, since your usernames might need to be reused with different passwords for different device types. Here, for example, the first two aliases have the same username, admin. Also note that the password is always hidden and cannot be recovered after initial entry. This fourth column, device count, is the one we're interested in. This is what tells us how many devices are currently using each credential, and if we click on the blue numbers, we can get a specific list of which devices are using this credential. But before I click on that, this is a good time to point out that you should always click Check Device Count before using the screen to get up-to-date information, because remember, these credential assignments, and your inventory for that matter, can be fluid. You're probably suspicious that our first two entries have the same username, admin, and the same device count, 10. The reason is that in this lab environment, the same username-password combination has been entered twice with two different aliases. We can confirm this by checking the device count number and seeing that each group has the same devices in it. There's ACI L3OUT 5023, and if I click the second one, it leads off with the same device. Well, how can that be? Well, think of network settings as a one-way reading. No individual device is actually tied to the alias defined here. Each device only has its own username and password, and the device list here is compiled by asking NetBrain how many devices have the same username-password combination that is being used by this alias. So, since these 10 devices have the same username-password as each of these aliases, they get listed in both. Now what if the device count equals 0? Well, that's exactly what it sounds like. For example, this test username is loaded into NetBrain, but currently no devices are using it. Sometimes that means it's an old retired credential that's no longer in use and it can be deleted from NetBrain. Or sometimes it may indicate a problem with the credential working successfully during device discovery, so it never gets used by any devices. Or maybe it's valid and you determine that it should be left in NetBrain as a possibility for use on future device discoveries. That's up to you. But if you determine that you can delete it from your environment, then you can right-click on it and choose Delete from the dropdown. In addition to delete, let's talk about the other options in this dropdown. First, you can always edit these credentials here if you want to update a password without actually creating a new alias. Although, as we'll see in a few minutes, this wouldn't actually change the password that is currently being used on any of your network devices. Next, we have 4 more options for this credentials order in this list. This is a reminder that your order of credentials on the screen matters in your discovery processes, because starting from the top, this is the order that NetBrain will try to use each credential when discovering new devices. If, for example, you have a NetBrain username that is preferred, but you also have an admin username that you only want to use as a last resort, then you might want to put the NetBrain username above the admin username in this list so that it will be tried in discovery before the admin username. Also, more commonly used credentials should be higher up in the list to speed up discoveries. This last option, Add to Device Group, is not directly related to credential management. It's a shortcut to assign devices using this credential into device groups. This can be especially important if we want to change a credential across a large number of devices. You see, as I mentioned earlier, changing a credential's password in network settings does not change the password for devices that were using this credential. In fact, it would only impact the credentials that NetBrain tries in future discoveries. But what if you don't want to rely on future discovery processes, and you need to change one of these passwords manually on all devices? Or maybe you want to make some other change, restricted only to the devices using this credential. One method would be to use the bottom option to add them to a device group. We'll go back to the desktop, the tic-tac-toe dots, and add a new device group. Let's call this one Network Settings _NB. This 0 means that there are no devices in the group now, but if I go back to Network Settings, right-click on the credential, click Add to Device Group, then I can select the group I just created, hit OK, and back on the desktop, if I hit refresh, that 0 turns into a 169. These are the same 169 devices that are using the NetBrain credential. At this point, we've come full circle, because I can just add any one of these devices to a map, open the same shared device settings where we started this video, and when I click Apply Above Settings to Device Group, choose the group I just created. Now using these checkboxes, anything that I change here will be applied across all 169 devices in my group. If you found this helpful, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the NetBrain YouTube channel so that you'll be notified when we release more videos like these to help you get the most out of your NetBrain platform. Don't forget to visit us at www.netbrain.com to learn about our latest no-code automation innovations, and we'll see you next time.